Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to today's webcast, To Build or to Buy. Today we will focus on the essential considerations in choosing to build on top of a platform versus building one from scratch. Both options have their pros and cons, but whether your solution solves 100 or 5,000 problems, having a good understanding of both is the right place to start. Richard Lee, Dynamic Web's online specialist and sales engineer, will present this topic. Richard has over 20 years of experience working directly with clients to develop e-commerce solutions for their businesses and is a motivated problem solver with an aptitude for innovation and solutions development. Before we get started, I ask that you please submit any questions you may have for today's presenter by typing them into the questions pane of the control panel in the upper right-hand corner of your screen. You may submit your questions at any time during the presentation, and we will address as many as possible during the Q&A session at the end of today's presentation. With that said, I'll pass the mic to Richard to kick off the presentation.
Thank you so much, Jessica, for the introduction and for the opportunity to co-host the webinar with AKA. So thank you for listening. And before I dive in, I'd just like to show you what our faces look like and may just give you a brief introduction into Dynamic Web. We got our start in 1999 as a content management solution and then developed the platform to include e-commerce as well as digital marketing as well as the content management as well as the ability to integrate into the ERP world. We are more popular in the top three markets of manufacturing, wholesale, and retail. The slide deck I just was speaking to, Gartner has some nice things to say about us, particularly around all-in-one business platform. I'll explain that later. And then let's dive right into the topic. So to build or to buy. And let me clarify what the long sentence is. The question is, build a e-commerce solution from scratch and maybe using some code that's open source, various places that this depending language that you might be developing the platform in. So if you're using .NET, there are open .NET places where you code from, or in PHP, the same goes language in that well. You buying, you're doing essentially for. And platform allows you to quickly do something. When the build method, you build things that we take like, oh, there's a system connected to a system, then all access the product and possibly specific pricing if you're in a B environment. Then there's the shopping and the add products, checkout, payment. That we what constitutes site. And the question that unpacking is whether you build this thing from purchase a form, buy a form to come or further. This next layer, which is the identity big risk that will and to econ. Now, it's very simple, and we'll identify rather. Let's get the go into understand. Okay, and I want to picture without showing the pie chart yet. That there's basically three ideas here. We got what we know, like name, where I know what this is. It's between B to C, etc. And then stuff that you know. Like, I know that we have to be PCI compliant, but I'm not sure of all the details of what that means. You know that ours equals, and because enough of always Google. Try to Google something that you don't even know. That's the third one here. So that's a concept that gets a little wordy here. It's what you know that you don't. I know I don't know German, but I know there's a called Esperanto, and I had that language because I didn't even know that there was such a language like that called that, right? So that's basically what this pie chart is. So we know what we know about, say, 20% of the total pie of and then 1.5% is what you don't know. I know German exists, but I don't know the language. And then the whole other piece, what you don't know that you don't know. And that's the big risk when you start to embark on a project like e-commerce, that it's sort of like, because you Amazon or you own it, you see a front-end perspective. But agree with me, there's a whole end behind plumbing that you have no idea. I click on the add the cart button, but I don't know that all the things happen behind it. So if this were just simply an oven and I turn the dial from 500 degrees all the way down, all the way over to broil, I really know what happens inside the oven when I turn the dial to broil, except that whatever's in the very bottom of the oven is going to heat up really hot, really fast. And so that's kind of, the problem with embarking to make software, is that when you're at 75 percentile where you're like, oh yeah, it would be cool if it does this, this, and that, that's, within the realm of the first quarter of that pie, that you what you want, but you may not know exactly how to get there, but you know what those concepts are. I want a gift card. Okay, cool. We could somehow figure out how that might work and might play into things. Things, let's say, a concept in e-commerce, advanced e-commerce, something called personalization. Okay, and personalization happens numerous different ways, but one way in which it works is that there's a tracking system behind the entire website, and based on a scoring system, which is another, let's say, called gamification. If you don't know what that concept is, and obviously how could you even Google it to find it, or to implement that solution inside of your product in order to do something that you never heard about. That's what we're talking about here. And that's why a platform kind of gives you that up into a realm that know and don't know. That's included, as well as all the other things that you never even heard of that will be of tremendous benefit to your website. So let's move on here. So let's talk about what you know and what you don't know. These are kind of the basic items of commerce solutions. So in B2B or B2C or both, who is your intended audience, right? You want a login system. So you need a login system that, it's private. There's a wall not allowing people on the B2B have to have a registered account. That's information inside the ERP, and then that login looks up that information and permits the user to log in. Then you have user accounts, so we keep lots of information about a user. Obviously, their user accounts or accounts inside of the ERP, but there's also there's also additional information that's captured around the e-commerce component of it, or maybe the behavioral tracking of a user, like how many minutes did they spend on the website, did they these pages, did they look at these products. Now that kind of, I assume that people know that. That's in the realm of what you know or don't know. I have another slide to kind of identify some other more complex concepts as well. And then shopping cart. We all know what a shopping cart is and all that. So in the very least, you're going through this list here and you're identifying, you're identifying the things in the basic level of what you need. I've left out some items here in the interest of time and saving on slides to show, but product catalog, order management, and then an integration into your system of record, maybe a CRM, ERP, product information management, or media asset management system, and so forth and so on. Maybe you have a database that's specifically for a parts or external parts library. So let's say if you're a heating ventilation company, you turn to external suppliers that provide component libraries, but you and your company kind of assemble this together to create one solution that's essentially a bill of materials that comes from another third party. But these are all concepts, but also features potentially that come into the realm of know and what you know and what you don't know. But then what happens when that other 75% of the pie that we're talking about, the unknown parts of things, where you assume, let's say, I know this from the world of, let's say, in an accounting package, like a small one like QuickBooks, right? Smaller one in the sense that when we compare it to an ERP. A small one like QuickBooks, if you're a new business owner, you may have a concept of what an invoice is, and you might have historically done it in Word, but in using an invoicing system like QuickBooks, you begin to see and have that aha moment that when you did it in Word, Word is independent of, the fact that someone's going to pay by check or credit card or cash, and then you're going to receive that money, and then you need like a general ledger where you apply that payment made and then assign it to, well, that was the invoice that I sent by Word. It's a very it's a system, it's a process that QuickBooks already identified and created as an environment that when using QuickBooks, you're part of that and you're more efficient by its nature of using that platform that way. Obviously, if you go in to make it that way, you're making it based on whoever is the architect of the system. They would have to know and be quite omnipotent to know everything that would need to go into it. And if they don't, they would need the wherewithal to be able to call in experts for the specifics of maybe accounts payable or accounts receivable, so that they've identified all the things that they need, not necessarily all that's possible, but all that's needed to go into for that particular project, that particular solution, or that particular version of the solution. So this is a version 1. We don't need all the bells and whistles. But down the road, if we know that, oh, that's possible, or that's how people operate typically in an accounting or payable or receivables department, they need those fields. That's why having something like an ERP, you're just simply turning it on versus having to build it from scratch and connect all the plumbing, the operational plumbing for things. So let's say what those things are here. So gamification layer, that's where, whether you can use it for a variety of things. Gamification just simply means that you're identifying behaviors and are capable of assigning points to this behavior. The reason you assign points to it is so that you can have logical statements somewhere in your system that says, okay, if I add 5 points to each of these product pages, and a user, whoever they are, goes to the site and they look at 3 of those 5 pages, each of those pages has 5 points. So if they earn 15 points, then I want to do something with it. What is that something you want to do? We call it content personalization. So gamification, personalization, they're kind of a pair, and often gamification may not be mentioned, but if someone knew gamification, then that helps with understanding how those layers work. But if you also know personalization and how to actually develop a personalization component, that is, ready-made often out of the box when a platform like Dynamic Webs has that built in already. Because if you're coming in with this concept to make a gamification system from scratch, is enormously difficult, because first you need the entire system already made, and then you need to identify what is the end goal, who is going to use it, and then how are they using it and where are they using it, in order for it to be simple so that it's the end user doesn't have to be a programmer in order to, or the administrator does not need to be a programmer to configure all sorts of logic statements like if then do this, and if this is valid, and then this is valid, and then that thing that was done 20 minutes ago is valid, then do this, this, and that. That's a lot of programming. I'm just simplifying it in the way I'm expressing it, but from a programming perspective, that takes a lot of time. And what I'm pointing out here is that, you know, I'll point out to it later that if you say, okay, I'm making an e-commerce site, I need a login system. You might spend weeks or months just to make a login system. And that's just maybe, let's call it 1/20th of the pie of an e-commerce solution. So if it takes months to do that part, then you can expect maybe the product catalog to take a whole lot longer than that. And that's kind of how we're looking at things. If you're trying to make something simple where it's like, hey, you know, I just want to make a proof of concept where, you know, just to show my executive team what could be possible, then you could code that from scratch. But if you're going in to make something that's robust or scalable to a more robust state and starting off with obviously the basics like a login system, product catalog, shopping cart, checkout system, etc., then you can consider using a platform that's going to give you a jump start and as well as bring in concepts that you may have forgotten that were essential to an e-commerce solution. All right, so other things too, gift cards. You want to do gift cards. So that is in and of itself quite complex because it's essentially a piggy bank of money that starts off as a purchase, and then that purchase, for some reason, I'm just speaking generically here, that purchase is actually money that you purchased in advance using other money, and then it deducts from that with every transaction. That's quite complex to include from scratch inside of your solution, and that's why often people turn to, okay, well, I made this basic version, and maybe you made it in WordPress, let's say, and then you have to turn to other third parties that give you the functionality, and then you have to take their code and infuse it with your code. And, you know, in the WordPress Magento world, it's, you know, I get a plugin and I download it, but it's not always that simple because if you've already have a custom layer and now you're bringing in a standardized layer into your custom layer, it still requires customization to infuse that in correctly. And with all of this customization, when you upgrade the core, the entire thing breaks, and then you have to go into each component to figure out what's going on. It becomes a growing mess of things, and it is, you know, it is no longer scalable because of that layer or multiple layers of customization. Other things too, like loyalty points, you know, to build loyalty with your customers, both B2B, B2C. Customers buy a product, they get points for it, and then later on they can redeem these points, or with a certain number of points they reach tiers. So when I reach the silver tier, because I have 5,000 points, I get free shipping for the year until I get to a higher level like gold, and then I get free shipping for the next year, etc. Loyalty points can also be used by a customer service rep. So that's something where now you have three audience members, essentially. You have your direct audience that's buying from your site. You have another audience that's your administrator or administrators of the site, plural. And then you have customer service people who need to access a portal in a way to maybe impersonate a customer. A customer is having trouble checking out. Imagine customer service logs in and they're like, okay, let me help you, Mr. Lee, on checking out. And or I'm sorry that Jessica, that you had didn't receive this in the time frame that you wanted. I'm going to give you 500 points to your account. So you see, there's another aspect of another type of essential user in your company that needs to access customer information, but may not go the route of the administrative way where the administrator can do everything to the site, including shutting it down. You just want to give limited access, like a user role and user rights to specific functionality without giving them full access to the entire system. And there I mentioned impersonation. That's where a customer service rep can impersonate a customer and finish the checkout for them, add things to the cart for them, and then let the customer check out as well. So that's amazing customer service, which doesn't have to be added immediately, but to add that in from a custom programming perspective is enormously complex because you're essentially creating another user type, but that user type is coming in technically from a completely different portal or screen view of things and adding to the complexity. Quote to cash, or also known as quoting. And it's essentially, you know, on one hand, you look at it and you're like, well, that's basically like a purchase order or sales order, except it's not, you know, final. It's kind of in a holding state. Okay, now in its simple form like that, okay, yeah, you could kind of build off of the sales order, purchase order system you already have now that you might have already customized. But what happens when you recognize that there's a lot of back and forth? Like I say, okay, I'll give you this at 5 cents a piece, but you got to buy 2 million of them. And then the customer's like, thanks, but I bought 2 million last year and you gave it to me for 4 cents. And you're like, that's right, I did. Okay, so let me go back and adjust the quote, and then here I'll give you it at 3.5 cents if you give me 2.5 million orders right now. That back and forth, now we're talking about, wow, now this sales order or purchase order that we thought we could build off of, it has more dimensions than that. There's actually like a history or versions of the quote that I gave out. How do we track that now? So it gets more and more complex on things. And, you know, programmers, especially good programmers, are good, but if you can try to offset the time that they spend on things, especially looking out into the future, like, you know, are we trying to get this site ready for Christmas? And let's say we're looking at a real time of, let's say, July 11th, then building this from scratch is not a good idea. Guided selling, right? I can give an example of that, but that's like a baby version of the next one, which is a configurator. So the mini version of what we call guided selling is a front-end interface, and that is custom programming, typically, even with a platform like ours. It's a custom solution in a way, but where is that data coming from? Does it come from the product catalog? Or does it come all the way back from the ERP or the CRM in order so that the guided selling system or a configurator can pull out real data in order to give the opportunity for customers to help themselves with configuring a very detailed or highly characterized product. So let's say something like a fire engine, a truck, or something like that, where, you know, it has the capacity to hold something, let's say water. So the difference between 10,000 gallons and 20,000 gallons is more than just more water, but it may mean that the whole chassis of the truck has to change and the number of axles in order to support double the weight, double the load, and obviously the pumping systems may need to change. So that's where configurators and guided selling interfaces help with augmenting or helping with configuring those things, and it's speaking to data that came in from the product catalog or the ERP. But at the end of the day, how much of that is customized that you have to, are you changing that frequently or changing that based on customers' needs? And would having a ready-made solution benefit you in some shape or form? So some of these big questions then is, like, as I pointed out earlier, are, do you really want to spend months developing just the user login system? Not even, let's say, if that's 1/16 of the pie, there's so many more things to be spending your time on. And if that, you know, sometimes, you know, here's the problem, is that when you tackle this project and you look, or one might look at the lowest hanging fruit of the set of problems. As Jessica indicated earlier, are we trying to solve 100 problems, 500 problems, or 10 million problems? And obviously, if we're trying to solve a large number of problems, even 500 problems, let's not try to solve all 500 at the same time. Let's move in baby steps. And that's where, when tackling a project like this, even if you use a platform, you have to come at it in a very strategic way. Because if you just try to go for the easy stuff, quote unquote easy, and say, okay, let's do the login system first, you may be going at it in the wrong direction. You may be coming into, you know, fighting a fire on the level where the floor is about to collapse. So that's where trying to identify, all the different pieces that go into it and recognizing that, and this is something that topples many startups where they try to go in with like, okay, we're going to make an app that's never been made before, and let's say it's going to be for an iPhone, and I want it to have every single feature, because we are, as all of us on this call today, we're also users of some piece of software. So let's say Word, for example, Microsoft Word processor. If when you use it today, you can naively assume that the version that you use today was the version that came out 20 years ago. And obviously for the most part, a word processor is generally all that, and Word at this stage is getting very tiny incremental updates on things, and it might be getting more security patches than it does have actual new feature sets. But my point is that, we come in with eyes of today and we forget about yesterday. And then you come in with eyes of today, you think, well, Microsoft has, or Word has all of these features already built in, so we got to come with version 1 to have at least that million number of features right at the beginning. And that's kind of, scary, because, all of those things, unbeknownst to whoever might be the architect who's thinking that way, those things came in time, over time, came as an influence of what user feedback came in saying, hey, can you offer a way for people who have difficulty reading so that the background, instead of it being white piece of paper, is actually black piece of paper with white text on there for contrast, or whatever the features may have come in, like the format painter, one of my favorite features in Word, where I can highlight something that's got a special font and italics and bold and underline or whatever font characteristics it has to it, and I can highlight it once and then highlight other words to contain that same look and feel. So coming at it from a very conservative approach, as if you have a fraction of the budget that you might have, a fraction of the time that you might have, and coming in that way, this way you can, reduce the chances of trying to eat more than you can chew, or bite off more than you can chew. And that's kind of the overall concept. It's a confluence of various different ideas that come into it. Obviously, I am working at a platform company, but with my other experience, I've made and led projects that came in from the from scratch model, and then some that were hybrid, which were a combination of a platform to give a jump start on things, and then within the structure or framework of that platform to grow or enhance it to do specific things to the operation. Then you could do it that way, or wholly use a platform in order to get the job done faster. It's already scalable based on its own framework, etc. All right, and then other questions to ask yourself, do you want to spend, if you're spending months developing a login system, do you want to spend several months developing a user behavioral tracking system? And for, the IT people, they're like, I don't even know what that is. But for someone who's in marketing, who wants to use the website as a marketing tool and machine as well, user behavioral tracking is essential to that aspect of it. And if it took months to do a login system, I can assure you it might take over a year to make a user behavioral tracking system. And then in the end, you're asking yourself, will it be cheaper in the end to build it versus buying a platform to give you that jump start on things? So that's essentially it in a nutshell. It's, there's a lot of factors that go into it. That is something I hear, every month there's a phone call where I might be on, and it's intended initially to be a demo, but then the question comes up often from a CEO that, why are we buying this? Wouldn't it make sense just to make it? And it's a great question. It's not something to be dismissed just because we're a platform company. In the end, there's, identifying what those needs are and how that's what translates into, maybe this is not necessarily a platform play. This is a direct shot using custom programming because of these reasons. Not necessarily to save money, because it's difficult to identify fully what is the total cost of the project for the long run of things, because various factors change, the various needs change, and often the magic is that once you get or you do your first phase of digital transformation, you go from phone, fax, and email of taking orders to just having a screen that people can log into, and it almost looks like Excel. That, and just doing that part, which you probably do as straight coding, that would open the doors and mind to all the people that work in the organization to say, aha, now I get it. Now I see why Amazon does it this way. Now I see why our competitor has this in their system to do it this way. And it kind of opens the doors to more opportunities, and that's where having all those doors and windows open at the very first phase of before you do any groundbreaking coding work at the beginning is essential, so that you more easily can identify where the platform sits in your world and where custom coding sits in your world or doesn't sit for that particular project. Okay, so with that said, I'd like to show you examples of how a back-end system like Dynamic Web has these features built in, and how a platform does some things that are above and beyond what you might expect could happen with a website. So to help with painting that picture, let me show you our solution framework, also known as my favorite slide on a slide deck. So this is, you know, an all-in-one platform. That's what Gartner calls us. It's just like in the concept of an ERP. There's the financial aspect of it. There's also the resource planning aspect of it, so human resources, raw materials, warehousing, logistics, everything all packed into one thing. So when you think about a website and all the things you might see from the front end, and then also know that there's an aspect of it, that there's someone who can go in and manage, not be a programmer at all, someone who can, and to augment the product catalog that came in from the ERP side, let's say Nav or AX, but we need to articulate, like, you know, let's say we sell medical devices, and often our customers, you know, they're in medical device space, but they can't spell all the products properly. So let's put the misspelled words as keywords inside the product catalog so that when they're on site, they can find it. So things of that nature, digital marketing, because we know that often customers come in, they're doing it the phone, fax, email way, and they're like, oh, good, we have a page now that people can order online. But it's not like Field of Dreams, build it and they'll come. There's a lot of marketing that needs to be done. So when people say like, well, we got the website going, you know, we identify that for every 100 people that come in, only 10 people are ordering. So we want to increase our conversion rates to make it from 10 people to 20 to 30 and beyond. How do we do that? And that's the realm of marketing here. And certainly you could turn services like for email marketing, a HubSpot for more search engine optimization stuff, email marketing, and maybe other behavioral tracking, or a Marketo for identifying those B2B customers that are on site, who are they, etc. Now you're turning to third-party products that also come with a fee, that also need to be implemented, and by themselves they're not that useful because you're wanting to be an integrated solution, integrated to your ERP. So having all of that built into one place allows you to, A, get access to concepts and ideas that are part of that 75% realm I talked about, what you don't know that you don't know. That is all built into Dynamic Web. So you'll see things like another concept within an e-commerce system like ours is the A/B split test. That's where I have 2 pages, and one part of me feels as a marketing person, you know, having pictures of us smiling in the About Us page is better than having pictures of our products in the About Us page. Well, if you use an A/B split test system, you can run the 2 at the time, and the system will automatically go randomly. Someone will see this page, someone will see the other page. If page is outperforming the other, that page be favored, and the other one will be off or deleted if you want to. Okay, so, but quickly around this slide here, and I'll dive into the back end to show you some cool stuff and features. You know, we integrate to the data source on the left, Nav and AX primarily CRM side, Dynamic CRM, Salesforce.com. PIM, we can connect to one of our partners, Perfion, as well as any external suppliers like other databases, or you have a data warehouse of historical orders that aren't kept in the ERP, we can tap into that to expose it to customers to log in. And then on the far right, the channels, the omni-channel, if you will, website, obviously has to be mobile friendly. The online store, self-service portal, so the Amazon way of doing things. Customers help themselves information. That will reduce the impact that your team has with phone calls, emails, and other requests for things that customers can help themselves to. And in an integrated environment, they're helping themselves to with real information from the ERP that's exposed just for that particular user from that particular company. Then email marketing built in, social media, and what's very popular today is third-party marketplaces. Now, even though I'm identifying a solution that you're using for your private channel of B2B or B2C sales or both, you may want to use the same platform to feed the XML schemas of the third-party marketplaces. So Wayfair, Amazon, Jet, Walmart, Walgreens, etc. All of those places that allow you to put your products to sell through their site. Wouldn't it be nice to use the same platform that you're already using to use for your channel, you use for the third-party marketplace channel as well? And then right in the center is where we situate ourselves. We got the content, the e-commerce, the marketing. They're blended together. And part of that blending to keep in mind is that websites are like digital lint brushes. They pick up, whether you want it to or not, they're picking up little bits of pieces of information about that particular user that's on the site. And then we have, so it captures that data, and then we're capable of taking that data like, okay, who looked at these pages but bought these products that were not on the pages that they looked at? And a marketing person would probably, be mouth-watering over that kind of information because you're blending behavioral information, and behavioral information is also kept in the ERP in terms of what they bought, what they bought, that's kept in the ERP because that's the sales order, purchase order. But their behaviors leading up to it, what we call micro conversions, like they looked at this page, they spent 20 minutes, they came in on Christmas Day, things like information that are also part and parcel to the overall behavioral analysis of a user or group of users is what's built into Dynamic Web as well. So let me move on past this. Let me show you just some customer reference. 35 here for the European division of Weber Grills. J. Manual Beauty used B2C with Nav for their cosmetic site. And Good Source Solutions here, food services, B2B only, integrated to Nav and PIM as well. So let me dive out to the live demo, return to the screen in a little bit. And I'm just going to show you in just about 7 minutes here to wrap up how we do Dynamic Web or inside of our platform. So I'm Dynamic Web over here. And I have, as Gartner had laid out for us, and we call ourselves also internally not an all-in-one, but we call ourselves more than a shopping cart, because often customers have this very narrow goal because they are coming in from the Excel method of doing things, the phone and fax method. So their narrow goal is like, let's just integrate this to our ERP and then call it a day. Obviously, the marketing people will be frustrated by that comment because there's a whole lot more than integrating it. It's promoting it and identifying our weak spots. And that's sometimes often better than if you have a platform that's capable of identifying those weak spots for you, because not all websites function properly and you owe the constant tweaking because thanks to the likes of Amazon and other large e-commerce sellers online, your customers might buy from you, but they at home buy from Amazon. And they're used to a level of online experience that your own website is unable to achieve. And yes, it's easy to say, well, you know, that's on. They have a $1 billion budget and thousands of people just to work on one component. We have 2 people for a whole site and far less than $1 billion to spend on this. But that's where a platform helps you with, having that, and depending on the platform, of course, having those features already built in, and then you're just leveraging that, or you're configuring that in order to implement it on your site here. So quickly here, content, files, users, e-commerce, and marketing. That's what we have all built into the platform. I don't have the time to show you all the single features, but let me show you some that I think are pretty cool here. So let's say under email messages here, and let's say special sales. And let's go here. Show page shows us what this page looks like. So here's Homer Simpson. It's a narrow page here because this is really an email marketing message. Because here now you can use a MailChimp, right? But here's the problem with a MailChimp. On the upside, the pro is that it's super cheap, and it's super easy to use, and it's a lot of drag and drop, and there's just a lot of templates that you can use and access. The problem is, and this goes unsaid and unnoticed until the person who uses it has to do this, is identifying customers. No longer are we in a day where you send one message to everybody, because one size does not fit all in the world of messaging people. People recognize that, okay, I'm being tracked. Okay, you know from my iPhone that I walked 5,000 steps today, and I'm standing right in front of your store because of a Bluetooth Internet of Things beacon is detected I'm there, and you know I'm right in front of your store. Great. Now, if you're just going to send me an email that says Happy July 4th with nothing specific to me, then I'm going to unsubscribe, and I'm not going to favor your company until I actually need something there again. But if you're capable of identifying behaviors and then now delivering a very specific message based on the behavior, that's the power of a more robust, smart platform to do that. And that's where I want to point and indicate that in just a moment. But in terms of developing what that looks like, here I have or what the page looks like. Here I have the Homer Simpson barbecue. Let's say I want to turn it off. So I just clicked off that image, and let's say I'm going to put in the Scarface cigar image here, and let's say I'm going to just disable the social media icons. So this page over here looks like this. I'm going to hit refresh, and now I have, I must have turned 2 things on. I got the 2 images up here, and that's why the 2 have changed. But it's just showing you how rapidly I can change an image if I want to. But now let's talk about how we customize it to give us the access to customers who are exhibiting a certain behavior. This is kind of the tip of the iceberg in our solution when it comes to the marketing aspect of our product. Now, this is something, we call it a smart search, but it's also known generally as targeted marketing. Okay, targeted marketing system now is, imagine it's almost like accessing, SQL, structured query language, where you're basically writing a command that says, okay, I want to identify all the customers that city equals Detroit, and products purchased equals this particular product, and then now I want to access behavior on the website. That's where you might fall short because you don't have a behavioral tracking system built in. And that's where I think the advanced marketers in your company will really enjoy something like this. So let me show you what that is. So I call it buy as a widget, but it could be anything. Like, for example, this one over here on the left that says loyalty points is 65 or higher. So imagine I want to identify people who have a certain number of loyalty points to let them know what they can build towards. Oh, you have 5,000 points today? Well, guess what? You can build up to 10,000 points, and at 10,000 points, you get to have dinner with our CEO, or something like that. Or let's say I want to identify all the people who've identified that they have a birthday in September. Then in September, when September comes, those people will automatically be emailed a happy birthday message with a 35% off coupon. That's how you, the audience here, have received emails like that, that's how they're capable of doing that. Hopefully they're using a system to do that versus going in to their Excel spreadsheet of all of their users of the website and seeing and identifying and sorting all the ones that have the September and then exporting that and then importing that into a system like MailChimp. And that was the downside of MailChimp, is that there's a lot of legwork to identify customers of a specific activity or behavior. And that's why people don't want to just receive like, I hope you have a wonderful July 4th. It's delete automatically. But if it's like, hey, we saw that you bought this, here are all the accessories for that product. Or, hey, you bought this and there's been a recall of it. We're now selling this product instead, and we're giving you 35% off and free shipping so that it's an easier transfer to that product from the old one for you. But let me just show you how this is made. And this is the power of built into Dynamic Web, so that a content or marketing person logs in. They do not need access to the ERP because we're going to give them access to the data here. And they don't need to be a programmer. They don't need to know structured query language at all. We allow them to do things really easily. So let's say you wanted to just make it playful and identify all the people with the name Daniela as the first name. You could do that, but we're not going to go that route. Let's say we go over here to, notice here the headline is behavior on website. So things like bought a product, that's transactional information the ERP keeps track of. So let's say I want to throw that in there, and then if I click on this little guy over here, it'll open up the product catalog, and I can specify the product category or the specific product or variant of the product that was purchased. But let's say here I want to add another rule. Well, they bought that product, but at the same time, they're doing some other behavior here. Let's say here, adding a product to the favorites list. Now, adding a product to the favorites list is not something the ERP has any idea about, nor does it care. So that's something our platform captures. So those behaviors on the website combined with the transactional behavior of making purchases can be combined together in order to create a very identifiable list of people. And if today that list contains 10 people that qualify, tomorrow, let's say Wednesday, or next month, at 6 months from now, as people qualify, they're automatically added to the list. I set this up once, I forget about it, and this list grows and grows as customers automatically qualify themselves based on the qualifications and conditions I was looking for. That then parlays into the marketing section where we could send out a targeted message at a certain frequency, let's say every other Friday, to that set of people in that list that's growing by itself with the message that we defined under content, and that happens all automatically. And that's how you can set up things like drip campaigns where everybody gets this message, but the moment someone purchases, they're removed from that drip campaign and added to a different drip campaign, and then all the other people who have not purchased receive different emails over time and so forth. So that, with the limited time that we have left, I'm going to basically wrap it up with, that's where, something like this in targeted marketing system, when it comes to your development of your website and as you address the build versus buy, it has to involve all the people on your team that are tasked with growing the company and certainly with growing the website. And all of their needs have to be considered. They don't have to be built from day one, but they have to be considered on how will they be implemented. How will we have a behavioral tracking system that can combine the ERP data with that so that the person who's using it does not have to be a programmer and does not have to count on an ERP analyst to pull that information out for them. We want to send a newsletter out whenever that person feels like it, not when the resources of other people in the company are available. Okay, so Jessica, I'm going to pass it to you, and I'm going to go back to the PowerPoint slide deck, and thank you for the chance to speak today.
Great, thank you. We still have a few minutes, so you can still submit any questions you have, but there's also a couple of questions already submitted, so let's begin to answer those. The first question is, should proof of concepts be made using a platform or from scratch coding?
Okay, yeah, so I kind of alluded to that earlier. So, often, like, let's say, it depends on what your proof of concept is and what it entails. Often, there are varying degrees of proof of concept is what I'm saying. But let's say, just as an example, you're a company that has for forever adapted to using only a phone, fax, or email to take orders in. And granted, even if you want full-blown new B2B e-commerce site, you're going to have a lot of your customers who are old-fashioned, and because they're older or they're just so accustomed to doing it this way, they'll remain phone and fax people. But obviously a younger generation is coming on board with the expectation that you have an iPhone app and that's what they're going to use to place orders. So they're going to be more inclined to use this newer technology or the existing technology today to place an order. But if you're just trying to show, like, look, here's the, what the concept is to upper management before you can get a budget for doing a full-blown e-commerce solution, that's where you might be inclined to just pull over one of your programmers if you have someone on the side, or you can always source it out to a programmer who can just put together something that works. It's not integrated, but can work to simply, here's a form, you fill out all the products that you're looking for. It's not doing a lookup of the products. They fill it out, they hit submit, an email goes out to the customer saying, we've received your order, and then an email goes to someone in the company or one general email box to say, hey, this order came in on the website. That's essentially a proof of concept, in my opinion, and that could very well be done from just pure custom programming, and it wouldn't take that long to make. But if you're looking to scale above that from a concept to something more complicated, and it might involve the integration and then involve other things, and then you just want to say, well, we made this proof of concept, let's just build off of that. That's where you're kind of, short-sighted, that, the proof of concept did its job, but it won't do the job as being the first 20 steps to a real robust solution. So I would say look at what you're trying to do, and if it's fairly straightforward and you're capable of identifying its soup to nuts in terms of its requirements, and that's something I didn't mention, identifying the requirements of what you're trying to achieve, who is the audience, what is the end goal, who are the different users, what are the different features, get that going first, and then you'll see easily, well, this is probably a from scratch proof of concept versus trying to build it off of a platform. That will come later after I get buy-in. Hope that helps with the question.
Thanks, Richard. The next question is, what part of an older website or implementation can be salvaged?
Oh, okay, that's a great question. So, that's a common question. So, often we, websites, they last for a period of time and then they need a facelift. And the facelift, ironically, is where, that's kind of the only part that can be salvaged often. Obviously, data comes across, and as long as it's highly structured, that will come across as well. But when it comes to, let's say, here's what happens often. We see people that are on a team and maybe it's driven more by the marketing people and they want a website, so they use a theme. They use WordPress. It's easy to make. They use a theme that they buy for $50. They put it on the website and it looks great, and then they're like, okay, yeah, we just build it, we make it pretty in WordPress, and then we'll integrate it later, as if integration is just a few clicks of your mouse and then it just happens. And then when they realize that that integration is harder than putting, building a bridge from New Jersey to the moon, they realize, oh my God, we got to start this whole project from scratch. And whether that was a theme that they bought for $50 or a theme that they had custom made for $15,000, that's really kind of the most salvageable part of a website, because whatever platform you're leaving, if you're going to another platform, then that whole thing, the whole plumbing has to change and will change. But if the design is relatively new and also follows the best practices of how a website interface should look, not this, versus, well, we had this crappy proof of concept with this crappy interface that we made. Let's just carry that crappy interface to this beautiful new platform. That is not a good idea. That won't happen. But you have a relatively new website that you launched, but sadly the integration part never worked, then we could salvage the design and move that over and also make it mobile friendly, and then just change the underlying plumbing to connect to the front end components of those designs.
Great, thank you. We have time for one more question. Does your platform support mobile versions too?
Yes, definitely. Mobile, you'll see that if you look at your Google Analytics, and I recommend you use Google Analytics on your website, one of the metrics that you can capture is what kind of device are people coming in on. So you will see that 60+% of your traffic is coming in on a mobile device. So think about it this way. You send a marketing email and you send it in the morning and you want it to be on the top of the pile of email that people are going to get. It gets in the morning early enough, someone is rolling out of bed, looking at their phone, and they're seeing your email. They click on that email. It doesn't go to their desktop. It goes to their phone to open up the site. That site is now the mobile version of the site that's showing and appearing, or the responsive version as it's also known as. So absolutely, all of our solutions are mobile friendly. So you make a change in the product catalog or some content pages, and that transfer of the look, feel, and content change is not just on the desktop, laptop version, regardless of your screen size, but it's on all mobile devices, from a small smartphone screen to a medium-sized tablet screen, and then all the larger sizes from that. Hopefully that answers the question too.